Dating is in a really interesting spot right now. You see this image of, this jester kind of jumping around trying to get into the DMs of a girl and stuff like that. It's a big meme right now, but it's actually pretty relatable for a lot of people, and it's actually something that is really prevalent. And I think this is because of social media. This video is largely inspired by Weiler, and he made a video on this, and all of these images and stuff are from that video. He articulated it very well. Go look in the description on that video, but this is kind of like my interpretation of it without an economics view. So yeah, dating is basically a marketplace right now. Capitalism and stuff such like that. Um, let's talk about social media standards. Now, the average date in the US, and this is largely influenced by the perception of what you put out there on social media and increasing standards, is pretty high based on, say, look at Florida is at 128, Texas at 110, California 226. Like they're all pretty high. So, dating is not necessarily cheap by any means, right? And especially if you're in a relationship. After that, then you start to commit a lot more financial, I guess, like or income, profit, whatever it may be, like towards that relationship, energy, right? Um, and social media is kind of like a place where you only put what people want to see, right? Most of the time, at least, or there's a handful that are split among I want to see like the nitty gritty, the work, everything that you put in, the stuff that doesn't look good. But 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to see those pictures of somebody posted that they went to China and they started eating hot pot and they went to the Great Wall or whatever, right? You only really see like the good part of social media on social media, right? I'm not seeing that you blacked out, got drunk, and some club or something like that, right? I'm probably not going to see that, only close friends, right? So largely, this raises the, I guess, sort of like societal standard that everyone's kind of like competing against each other, and that leaves basically infinite options. There's always going to be somebody that is better. So why would I choose you when I could have this person that is better than you? Oh my God, look at this person. He makes so much money. He's traveling everywhere. He's doing all this stuff. Why would I choose you if you are lesser than that person, right? That's kind of how I'm kind of viewing it at this point. And so that's infinite options. So why would you date somebody when there's always somebody better? It's kind of like the mindset that everyone's going through. And social media, like being able to portray yourself, you could be flat broke and still, lie or post pictures or LARPing, whatever it may be, the terms that are used. And you could still be seen as like, holy shit, this guy's amazing, right? And so that's kind of like your public image, your advertisement of yourself, which our generation largely relies on. The people that you meet, the friends that you have, are largely based off of that. If you don't meet them in person first, what is the thing that somebody remembers you for most? And it's usually something that is on social media or something that you've done that drives that conversation, right? Where typically in the past it's kind of just like, oh, I met this person at the bar, or cold approach, stuff like that, right? And this kind of image creates this sort of status, right? The status on social media that you have drives this sort of like consumption of all this sort of content, and it kind of feeds into your brain this kind of status bias where you can only accept this person if they meet all of these sort of qualifications. And even if they do, there's still some flaw that you can find about them, and then you just throw them away, right? And so the perception of yourself on social media basically has created this very high standard, is what I'm trying to say here. And so there's a kind of like an example that I want to give here. So let's say, I don't know, you're in this position right here. You are, I don't know, making six figures, you work out, you make videos, you have a bunch of hobbies that you enjoy, and like you're relatively young, right? And then somebody, some random girl, you had a date with her, and she says, "You're not good enough. You're not ambitious enough." Why? He's like, thought I did everything right. He's like, you could have made $10 more every single month, or you could have paid for XYZ, or you could have done something, whatever it may be, whichever party it may be as well. Um, Kind of the standard that you always need to be better in some sort of way, because there always is a bigger fish, right? Small fish, big pond, especially on dating apps and stuff like that, which we'll talk about later. But if you're never going to be good enough, why even try, right? There's infinite options, right? There's infinite options on social media. There's infinite options on dating apps. So these are some stats that I pulled as well. In general, you will see, like, obviously on Tinder, Hinge, whatever it may be, there's a lot more men on these apps than there are women, and I think that's a general trend that we can see. Just based on stats from Tinder, you can go check Hinge and stuff. But in general, because there's a lot of different options of men and women, but more so there's a lot more men. But because they don't meet this certain standard, there's a small number of men that are receiving a large amount of attention rather than the distribution is equal, right? And that's largely probably because of this sort of like social media standard that we have of this person needs to have XYZ stuff that I mentioned forward. And so this sort of like infinite options kind of idea that we have here is more so like um, people feel entitled to want to have this sort of image of this ideal person that they want, and because they feel entitled, they want to work hard so that they cannot be average, or even if you are average, they still feel entitled to somebody who is above average, right? And so in general, we will see that like women have the advantage on these apps because there's so much attention focused on one sort of person rather than any sort of average person or somebody that is above average, and then all the under average or ugly, short, fat, whatever it may be, dudes are just not even looked at, right? So yeah, I don't really like dating apps that much. I tried in the past, not really my thing. Definitely prefer just going in person, meeting somebody, stuff like that. Um, but then after that, it's like, okay, I've exhausted all of my options. I tried in person, uh, you know, on dating apps, and nothing's working out for me. Maybe I just don't meet any of the qualifications. But I think this is largely for men because all the focus, all the attention is focused on a small subset of guys who meet some sort of standards, right? Um, they start to just give up, right? And I think like a lot of Gen Z, people, or like people within our generation are lonely for this reason because not only can they not meet the standards of somebody that they want to be in a relationship with, but in general, the standards on social media that have created a sort of like that same dynamic among social groups or friends and people like that. And so we see this a lot. Um, I was looking into South Korea. South Korea has one of the most interesting like social dynamics among like their generation and stuff. And for that reason, they have a very high, or I think the highest suicide rate, right? Because social media presence there is everything. How you look, what you do, who you hang out with, it can damage your reputation. And so that reputation sort of thing leads people to not want to interact with all certain walks of life, right? So even if you put in a lot of effort, right? Even if you put in so much effort and it doesn't produce any results, you're probably thinking, okay, why should I even continue in the first place? Well, that's probably not a very good mindset to take, but that's the reality of things. And so, because you have the lack of these sort of like successes or standards that you don't meet for these certain people that have a very high bar that has been set because of social media, why would you continue? And if you cannot maybe afford to go on dates, because as we saw in this image, like dates are pretty expensive. They're not cheap by any means. You might become like lonely because you turn away from people. You start to seclude yourself. You turn to corn, gaming, etc. And you go through other means to um, make yourself more sociable in a secluded manner. And that's usually online, right? So what's the end game or like stories with dating apps then? Well, I think dating apps, they obviously we said they create infinite options, but I still generally think that real life interaction usually will like yield better results because it's kind of demeaning in a way, right? You have, I don't know, you spend maybe 5 to 10 seconds on a person's profile or how they look, and then you go, okay, yes or no, and so you can theoretically, it's a nice thing. Oh wow, I can meet so many different people, but as we mentioned, like the trade-offs of that is that you're kind of just demeaning these people, one, or two, you're having an increasing amount of sort of standards for every single person that you look at, and then all of those social factors, whatever it may be, like money, who they know, what do they do, etc. So those high standards are typically also prospering on these sort of like dating apps. I remember when my friend told me, he's like, hey, don't go on the dating apps, like I don't think you're ready for that. He's like, what do you mean ready for it? It's like, is it not for everyone? And he said, no, it's like I think only hot people really only get matches on there. And so, well, you can then guess what the end game of that was. In any case, it's a small fish, big pond because attention is really only focused on, like I said, only a subgroup of guys who meet all of these sort of standards, right? And I'm not saying, necessarily it's a good or a bad thing to have high standards, but it's important to match them as well. So yeah, that's kind of the topic I want to talk about today. Yeah, check out links in the description for Discord, other social media stuff, and yeah, thank you.